Good morning, everybody. Today is the 20th day of the month of Sivan. It is the 7th day of the month of June. Hello. And you've finally arrived. It's been almost a year. And we are on page 48 in the book of The Art of Giving. Last week, we discussed the idea of the withholding, which is the opposite of giving. Giving is to give, to flow, to present. And then there's the withholding, that is stopping of giving. And the idea is that when God creates this world, he projects an energy of God. And at some point, it comes down and it turns into what we have in our world today. The people, the animals, the vegetation, and the lifeless objects, like earth and water and mountains and whatever. And those items that are in this world, when you look at them, you can't necessarily ascertain that there's God there. You'll have to search for God. You have to look for God. You have to dig for God. So when God created this world, there had to be not just a projection or a flow of energy, they also had to be a withholding. And that is why, this was right at the end of last week's class. You know, you hear that in Judaism, you hear in this house some noise that shouldn't be here. Well, just wait until you finish there. Okay. In Judaism, you always hear that the day starts in the previous night. So the Shabbos doesn't start Shabbos morning. It starts on Friday night, as we used to have our thing, and we will soon be resurrecting that. Turn Friday night into Shabbat. It's Friday night that is Shabbos. When does it start? It starts at sunset. As the sun goes down, the previous day is over. Why does it start that way? Why does Judaism start at night? Why does the Passover start at night? Why does every single thing that we have start on the night before? Why? Because the Torah says it was evening and it was morning, day one, evening and morning, day two. That's a story of creation. First God created the evening, then God created the morning. But the question is just on that. So then why did God do it that way? Because night, the darkness, is a representation of withholding, of holding back. Because there's no light. Light is a flow. It's giving. It's here. Take it. It's a stream. And darkness is withholding of that. And the way God created this world was that it first had to have a withholding. There had to be a constriction of the energy in order that this world should be a world that you can't see God. Wait a minute, is that the purpose of creation? It shouldn't see God? No, that we should uncover it. We should reveal it to the world. That's the purpose of creation. The purpose of creation is that we should do the things that God wants us to do, and that reveals God in this world. And the things that we do, the good deeds that we do, that the Torah says this is what you should do, those good deeds are the ones that bring God into this world. So you have a mezuzah on your door, and you put tefillin on your arm, and you observe the Shabbos, and you observe kosher, and you give tzedakah. These are elements that introduce godliness into this world after the withholding that this world should look the way it does, and it shouldn't look like some kind of godly oasis, some godly place where angels live. God wants humans in here so that humans should bring out the godliness that is in the capability of what we are to do. In other words, God is not asking us to be angels. Angels are fixed. They are in one way, in one position, and they are always good. They're angels. Always. God is asking us not to be angels. God is asking us to be, as the Haftarah of yesterday said, movers. Movers means that we move, we elevate ourselves from level to level, hopefully. This world is like a ladder. You either go up. It's like a ramp. You either go up, but if you don't go up, you're going to go the other way. You can't be static in this world. If a person is static, that means a person is going down. As somebody sent me a thing, somebody invited me to a birthday party. The problem is I can't get there. It's in Melbourne, Australia. Just this morning.
Just down.
Down under. And under.
Right. Simple.
But in his invitation, he sent one of these euphemisms or whatever, and it said over there, the only one that you should better every single day is yourself over yesterday. So that's an idea as we grow, and we have opportunities every single day to be better than we were the day before. And however good we were the day before, today's a new day, and today is new energies, and today is a new focus, and today we can elevate, we can climb. Or to take it to the absolute extreme, as one very big, important member of those who are trying to save Jews from the Holocaust was saying that anyone, Switzerland, we're just passive. We stand at the side. We're not doing anything. And anyone who stands aside in the face of atrocities and murder and torture and so on is only aiding the enemy. Stand aside doesn't help anyone. It just helps the enemy. It just helps those who are continuously looking to hurt others. Standing pat. That's how it is in life. In life, every day, we have opportunities to grow, to be better than the day before. Yesterday you did this much, today you can do more because it's a new day. And it's the same thing with dealing with issues. Yesterday, the world was falling on my head. The whole roof fell in and everything fell apart. And you know what? Today's a new day. And therefore, we can get away from that bad energy that we had yesterday, bad mood that you had yesterday, bad headache, whatever it is. Today's a new day. That's how it is. We have our ups, and then we have our challenges that we have to somehow maintain our up, or else we're going down. Okay, so what he said last week was that the world had this stage. It had a flow of God, but immediately a withholding, so that what should come down to the bottom of the barrel, which is where we are, this world should be a world that doesn't reflect godliness in its obvious state, but you have to look for it, you have to reveal it, you have to undig it to find it. Okay, we are now holding towards the end of page 48, the second to last paragraph. This is also the concept of tzedek and tzedakah. We're trying to discover what tzedakah is. The art of giving. Tzedakah means charity. We translate it as that means to give something to those who are needy, to people or to organizations that are needy. So tzedakah means to give. But the word tzedek, which is the beginning of the first three letters of the four letters of tzedakah, means righteousness or justice, like doing things right. So tzedek symbolizes malchut, when it is a recipient of from the Gevurot, as stated in Idra Zuta 29.1b. Idra Zuta is a section of the Zohar. We mentioned previously that the Zohar is basically consistent. Well, Zohar, which is the Bible of Kabbalah, the source of Kabbalah, written by Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and his Talmudic friends, sages of the Talmud, great, holy, wonderful, amazing people. And so one of the books is Idra Zuta. Idra Zuta means like the small assembly. The small assembly because the people who were there, some of them didn't make it. It was so intense, whatever's in that section of the Zohar. So in the Idra Zuta, it basically maps out the way the God's energy came to this world. And it defines over there the 7 levels that we talked about that are reflective of the 7 emotions and the 3 intellectual capabilities that every single human being is granted, is given. And so over there it says that Malchut, which means kingship or royalty, is the bottom of the barrel. Malchut is the feminine level, not that the females are on the bottom, but that the the females represent the receiving end, as opposed to the males that represent the giving edge, the giving. Because the male gives and the female receives what the male gives and develops that source of energy. So Malchut is the bottom, the lowest. Let's not call it the bottom. Let's call it the final of the characteristics of the levels through which energy is transmitted, and that in turn prepares the next level. There has to be a beginning, there has to be an end at some point, and the end is there to prepare for the next generation, the next source of energy, the next world, if you will. So Malchut represents the final. Gevura, which means might or strength, and we said before that strength and might is a reference to withholding. To give, you can just pour, but to withhold, you've got to stop it. You've got to hold it back. That's a might. That's a strength. The withholding, as it is reflected in the final level. So let's look at it again. Tzedek, or righteousness, symbolizes Malchut. Malchut, the final level, when it is a recipient from the Gevurot, from the withholding level. What I would like to do is, I would like to immediately go to footnote 75, and this will give a better, clearer understanding of what Malchut is. Let's see. Binyan HaMalchut, the building of the kingship. Binyan means to build. Malchut is kingship or royalty. Malchut, kingship, is the last of the 10 divine attributes, which we call Sefirot, and serves as the supernal link between creator and creation. That means that this is the final link which allows the next level to begin, and that's what creation is. Creation is a successive amount of energy until you've built whatever you have to build. So the Malchut is the bottom, the final level there. It is through this attribute that all of existence comes into being. The formation of Malchut via these restraining forces, that means you have 6 forces ahead of it. It's the 7th one. 7 of the divine attributes. So the 6 before it is crucial to its functioning as a creative force. Without the withholding, you can't have a creating. Since creation is only possible through the gevurot, or restricting and concealing the divine light, so that it is elicited in a finite manner, allowing for the creation of finite beings. An example, which would help us a lot here. The interaction between a king and his subjects. Maintaining a sense of aloofness for that king, and distance, which are both expressions of gevura. Aloofness means that he's withholding himself. He's staying away. And restriction, of course, he's restricting himself, staying away. So when a king has that type of attitude, which is 100% necessary, because without that, the king can't be your friend. If the king is your friend, then the king can't rule. He can't mete out justice. And those who are his friends, they're not really subject to the same way the rest of the subjects are. Because they're ministers and they're very familiar with the king. They don't have that kind of awe and reverence to the king because they're too close. So, maintaining this sense of aloofness is vital for the king in his administration of the people and his kingdom. It's vital. If all boundaries and limitations were to be removed, if you went hunting and fishing with the king and you're hanging out, then the king would be unable to function as a ruler. For the people and the kingdom would be utterly overwhelmed and paralyzed by the revelation of his power and glory. He's saying it from the other side. I don't like that where he's going with this example. This is just an example that the editor is putting here. That he says that if the king would expose himself to all his glory, everybody would be all awed. I say the opposite. If he exposed himself to all his glory, he would lose it all. Mm-hmm. Similarly, Malchut requires the element of restriction and concealment to create a distance between creator and creation and allow for the world's existence as an independent entity. Malchut gives that aloofness, that kingship, that royalty, that it maintains a barrier, and now the king cannot be revealed. I think that's an error of this editor who wrote this parable, because he's going in a direction that I think is not intended to him. Listen, he's a human being, and so am I. Yes.
But isn't it so that all those Jewish people that are doing as many of the mitzvot as they can, their goal is to have a relationship with God or the King, and to have a better understanding of His wisdom and glory? And so isn't that a contradiction to this?
Very good question, an excellent question. But there are two elements that we have in our relationship with God. There is Avinu, and then there is Avinu Malkeinu. Avinu, this is what we say in the high holidays and special occasions. Avinu means our Father. Malkeinu means our King. We have a father and we have a king. A king is not a father. That means that if a king has 200 children, he will not be a king over any of them, because he is their father. And the relationship that you have with a father is not as a king. You may revere your father, you may respect your father, you may honor your father, you may be in awe of him, but ultimately he is a father. And then with a father, you have a different type of relationship than you would have with a king. On this past Friday, in his sleep, one of the Rebbe's closest aides passed away. His name was Rabbi Klein. He was just about to celebrate his 80th birthday, and he passed it in his sleep, but totally unexpected. Now, I was listening to an interview with him from a few years ago, and the question that he was asked was, do you remember your first time going into the Rebbe as an aide? Now, I will let you know, last Sunday we had over here Rabbi Grona Sr., who was the closest of the aides in the later years. In the last 15 years or so of the Rebbe, he was the closest one. He would go in all the time. I watched him in 1991. He had been working with the Rebbe since 1948, I think it was, or 47. This is decades later. The man had gone in and out basically every day. If he was in town, he was in with the Rebbe every day. Whatever, I don't know what they were doing there, and then, the rest of the world didn't have a clue of how they went in. But I was standing in a distance from him as he was prepared to go into the Rebbe. He was about to knock on the door and go in. And I saw him shaking. 1991. I saw him, he was like putting together his beard, he was like straightening himself out, put his hat on, and he was like uptight. So this Rabbi Klein, who passed away on Friday, in an interview, he said that, they asked him, do you remember the first time you went in? And he says, of course I do. And the second, and the 100th, and the 1000th, because they were all the same. You never knew what was going to be on the other side of that door. You could have seen a piece of heaven literally in front of your eyes because what the Rebbe did, or you could have been privy to some kind of private matter that nobody will ever know. There was daily issues, business that had to be done. Here's an example that was just forwarded last night by one of his children, that there was an army base in Israel, and they refused to put up any mezuzah there. But the people, the soldiers who were there, asked for mezuzah, and they said, no mezuzah on the door. And somehow this got back to the Rebbe. And the Rebbe sent 500 mezuzahs. 500, you know how much money that is? There's thousands upon thousands I sent them, but he couldn't come from him. Because if he came from the Lubavitch Rebbe, who are you to mix into the affairs of Israel? And then the army as well. And so he paid for them, he bought them, and he got a hold of Klein. And he said to him, go to this and this place and this address and this and that. Look, see this and this guy who was one of the Israeli people, but he knows that we have some issues. Give him the mezuzahs and tell him that not to say where they're from, and just put them up and make sure that the army base is covered. That wasn't just a private, not a secret. That was just something that he didn't want it to get out. But then there were things that were daily issues with Israel, with Russia, with things that nobody. And this Rabbi Klein was a was one of these guys that he didn't have any people around him. He didn't have a posse. He didn't have anyone helping him. He had to be maintained. In fact, he maintained an attitude of a little bit of a fool. And he did that so people shouldn't bother him with. So he stood there. When the Rebbe would talk, he would stand and look around, kind of thing. And it was as if, is he missing the whole point? He didn't miss anything. But he made a public a presence of himself as though he was, I'm just a simple guy going in and out. But deep down, though, he was running all kinds of stuff that was going on. Okay, now this is a man who went to the Rebbe many times, and he says, my first time and my 1000th time was exactly the same. And I saw it with my own eyes with Rabbi Groner. I saw how he was trembling. This is decades after he was working there. That is a king. A king is revered and awed, not because the king isn't a loving and giving person. But in this case, this was a man of God that you went into. When you closed that door behind you, you didn't know what was going to happen over there, and therefore you had to be completely focused and prepared for whatever was going to be happening in that room. There could have been miracles that happened like openly in front of them that nobody will ever know. Go tell this person, I know of a man who was I know him, and he's alive today, and I know him well. And he lives in the United States, and he was on the operating, had a heart attack, and he was dead. The doctor says, it's over. And he was doing some kind of surgery or whatever it was. And they called the Rebbe. The Rebbe got on. The Rebbe told Rabbi Klein, tell the people, put the phone to his ear, and you say that the Rebbe says you need to get up. He's alive today, and I know this man. I can point him out to you. And I heard this not from him, but from those who were there. So these are the kind of things. If he was standing in the Rebbe's room, the Rebbe said, "I have to take my phone." And so you were witnessing things in front of you that you didn't know, or it could have been just a routine. Have a pile of letters over here that are from requests from different people. The Rebbe got a sack of mail every day. And there were letters that needed, and there were correspondences that needed to be handled. The Rebbe didn't sit and type everything. If he did that, he would be typing 24 and wouldn't have an opportunity to do anything else. So he had people who would be answering. He had the different people who were calling this one now. All right, I've got 15 responses that I need to give now, and this and this, and some of them he would write little short lines, and then okay, here's a pile of 30 answers. Go give them out. Do this and then. It was like running the thing with these people. So sometimes it was more a routine, but there was never routine in there. That's what he was saying. Why? Because we're talking about a man of God, not just a king who runs the country, but a man of God that they realize that as much as close as they may be, as easy it may be for them to ask something for a regular person, they wouldn't be able to do that even. Nonetheless, they had this reverence, this awe for him that was, the Rebbe was not treated even by his closest aides like a regular person because they saw more than what we saw. A regular king, though, has around him ministers who are advisors. He says he needs advice. It's a long story. I'm not sure if I told this story yet, the Coca-Cola story. But I'll tell this one day. I'll tell it over here. But the bottom line is Coca-Cola is based in Atlanta. They came to Chabad when I was right after the Rebbe passed away, and there was a big noise, all the newspapers and all the footage, and they came and they wanted to know what's the secret of Chabad. That was the two men dressed to the finest, attaché cases, everything. Wanted to know what's the secret of Chabad. So I said, it's hard to talk to someone who, how do you explain the Rebbe? You have to spend a lot of time to just build up the picture of who this person was. And this is the secret. So I started to tell them, anyway, the bottom line is they couldn't understand what I was saying. And the question that they asked me indicated that. They said to me, he came down and told the world that I would like you to focus on, studying Torah, this and this. And within 24 hours, the whole world was